Hi, my name's Harmony, and 3 weeks ago, while I was in labor, wet, contracting, scared, my husband and mother-in-law changed the locks on our home and left me standing in the rain. They watched me through the window like I was a stranger, like I didn't belong there. But that wasn't the beginning. That was just the moment everything snapped. They planned it, every move, the lock, the silence, the betrayal, so someone else could sleep in my bed while I screamed for help. You think that's the worst part? It wasn't. Want to know what came after? The drizzle had been falling since late afternoon, the kind that clings to your skin and settles into your bones. From my living room window, I could see the street lamps casting halos of pale yellow over the slick pavement. It should have felt peaceful. My due date was just 2 weeks away, and the nursery upstairs was ready. Neutral tones, soft textures, a space I had poured my heart into. I'd been home most of the day, sorting through fabric samples for a client, pausing every so often to glance at the baby swing in the corner. I'd imagined Dorian and me sitting there in the evenings, watching our little one drift off to sleep. That picture kept me going through the fatigue and the restless nights. Dorian had been at work, managing the upscale furniture store downtown, and Vera, his mother, lived just across town. Her presence had always been constant. Too constant. She had a way of slipping into decisions that weren't hers, as if my life was a space she could rearrange to her liking. It wasn't that I hadn't tried to get along. I'd smiled through her uninvited decorating tips and the way she'd subtly redirect conversations at family dinners so my voice faded into the background. I told myself that once the baby came, she'd see me differently, not just as the woman who took her son, but as the mother of her grandchild. Maybe then we'd be on the same side. I was in the kitchen rinsing a mug when I heard the front door open. Vera's perfume, sharp and floral, hit me before I saw her. She stepped in like she owned the place, holding a glossy gift bag covered in pastel ribbons. "I was in the neighborhood," she said, her voice lilting like this was a casual drop-by. "Thought I'd bring something for the baby." I dried my hands on a dish towel, forcing a smile. "That's thoughtful, Vera." She set the bag on the counter and waited. I pulled out the tissue paper, revealing a crib set, bright pink, frilly edges, little ballerina slippers embroidered into the fabric. The exact opposite of the calm, gender-neutral space I'd been creating. "I remember you said you didn't want to know the gender," Vera said, watching my face. "But a grandmother knows best. A girl should have something feminine." I ran my fingers over the satin trim, my smile tightening. Months ago, I'd mentioned to her, more than once, that I wanted to avoid the pink and blue cliches. She'd just erased that. "It's very bright," I said carefully. "It's cheerful," she corrected. "Babies need color, you'll see." She took a seat at the kitchen table like she was settling in for coffee, though she hadn't been invited to stay. I folded the tissue paper back into the bag and set it aside, my mind flicking through the other times she'd known best, repainting the guest room without asking, inviting herself to my doctor's appointment because fathers don't always know what to ask, rearranging the pantry so nothing was where I left it. Each small act had chipped away at my sense of control in my own home. For the baby's sake, I'd told myself, keep the peace. Don't start battles you don't have to fight. 2 weeks later, that fragile peace was nowhere in sight. I'd gone up to Seattle for a short visit with my sister Celine, partly to get a break from Vera's constant hovering. Celine's house was warm and filled with the smell of roasted chicken when I arrived. We spent the afternoon catching up, swapping stories over tea, letting her 2 boys show me their latest school projects. It was during dinner, mid-laugh at one of Celine's jokes, that it hit, a sharp, tightening pain across my abdomen that made me set my fork down. "You okay?" Celine's voice dropped, eyes scanning my face. "I think that was a contraction." I put a hand on my belly, feeling the faint ripple ease away. We timed the next one. It came 12 minutes later, then 10. By the third, Celine was already suggesting we head to the hospital. "I should drive home first," I told her. "Dorian will want to be there. We can go together." Celine hesitated. "Harmony, if these keep coming." "I'll make it," I insisted. "It's just over 2 hours." I want him to be part of this from the start. I hugged her quickly, promising to call from the road, and slid behind the wheel. The sun had dipped completely, leaving only the slick reflection of headlights on wet asphalt. The rain picked up as I merged onto I-5, windshield wipers working in frantic rhythm. "Looks like you're ready to meet us," I murmured to my belly. I pictured walking into the house, Dorian's eyes lighting up when I said the words, "It's time," maybe even a rare smile from Vera when she realized she'd been included in the moment. The highway stretched dark and glistening ahead. Now and then, my phone signal dipped, nothing unusual for this stretch, but it left me uneasy. I shook it off, focusing on the steady hum of the tires and the soft roll of the baby under my hand. The closer I got to home, the more my anticipation built, smoothing over the twinges of pain. This was it, the night our family would change forever. Turning onto our street, I spotted the warm glow spilling from our living room window. Relief washed through me, but as I slowed the car, my eyes caught on a shadow in the window, a still, watching silhouette, and something in my chest tightened, hard. The rain intensified as I eased the car into our driveway, headlights cutting a pale tunnel through the darkness. Water pooled in uneven patches on the concrete, splashing under my tires. My stomach tightened again, a sharp wave that made me suck in air and grip the steering wheel harder. I parked, leaving the engine running for a moment, hoping to steady my breathing before I stepped out. Through the haze of rain on the windshield, I looked toward the living room window. The glow inside should have been inviting, but instead it seemed distant, unreachable. My eyes adjusted enough to make out two figures sitting on the couch, Dorian, leaning back, a coffee mug in his hand, and Vera beside him. Neither moved, neither looked toward the window as if they sensed me. I killed the engine and swung the door open. Cold rain hit me instantly, drenching the shoulders of my coat. One hand braced against the car, I forced myself upright, willing my legs to move despite the tightening in my abdomen. I fished my keys from my bag with trembling fingers, already imagining the warmth that would hit me when the door opened, the relief of stepping inside, telling Dorian, "It's time." I slid the key into the lock and turned. It didn't budge. At first, I thought maybe my hand had slipped from the wet metal, so I pulled it out, wiped my palm against my coat, and tried again. The key fit the slot, but it wouldn't turn. My brows drew together as I jiggled it, pressed harder, twisted. Nothing. A chill, unrelated to the rain, crept through me. I bent closer, squinting at the lock. The metal looked newer, shinier than I remembered. I knocked, my knuckles dull against the solid wood. "Dorian!" I called out, raising my voice over the rain. "It's me! Open the door! My contractions are getting closer!" Through the pane of glass beside the door, I saw him lift his head. For a moment, our eyes met. He didn't look surprised to see me. He didn't even look concerned. He just looked. And then he set his coffee down, but not to stand or move toward me. He leaned back, expression unreadable. "Dorian, please," I tried again, pounding harder now. "The baby's coming." "Let me in." My voice cracked on the last word, but he didn't stir. The rain was soaking through my coat. My hair clung to my cheeks, plastered by the wind. A contraction gripped my lower back, forcing me to press one hand to the doorframe for support. That was when movement in the window caught my eye. Vera rose from the couch and walked toward me. She stopped just behind the glass, her face framed by the curtain's edge. Her mouth curved, not into warmth, but something closer to amusement. She lifted her palm and placed it against the glass, right across from mine. "You made your choice when you disrespected this family," she said slowly, her voice carrying through the narrow gap in the window frame. "Now live with the consequences." I blinked rain from my lashes, disbelief freezing me in place. "What are you talking about? I haven't— Vera, I'm in labor. I need to get to the hospital." Her expression didn't shift. "A woman who can't respect her husband's family doesn't deserve to be treated like family. You'll learn." She turned her head toward Dorian. I could just make out her saying something to him, though the words were muffled. Dorian's gaze met mine once more, just briefly, and there was no urgency in it, no hint of the man I thought I'd married. He lowered his eyes to the coffee again. Another contraction hit, sharper, longer than the last. My knees threatened to give out, so I braced myself against the wall beside the door. The cold of the siding seeped through the damp fabric of my coat. My mind was scrambling for any explanation that wasn't as awful as the one taking shape. But the truth was right in front of me. This wasn't an accident. Someone had changed the lock. Someone had decided I would be on the wrong side of this door. I pounded one last time. "Dorian!" My voice was hoarse, barely carrying over the rain. "This is your child. Your wife. How can you—" My breath caught mid-sentence. The sound of the deadbolt sliding into place was louder than the rain, louder than my heartbeat. It was final, deliberate. I staggered back a step, my boots splashing in the shallow water pooling at the threshold. The light from inside spilled onto the porch, warm against the cold night, but it might as well have been miles away. I was alone, locked out of my own home, while my husband and his mother sat inside. My chest rose and fell rapidly as I fought to keep my balance, the contractions still fading. I looked at the window one more time, but the curtain had been drawn. The rain kept falling, soaking me through, and all I could hear was that lock, clicking shut. I stood there for a moment longer, my breath catching in the cold air, rain streaming into my eyes, trying to decide if I should scream or collapse. The porch light flickered faintly against the downpour, and I could see my own reflection in the window, hair plastered to my cheeks, coat heavy with water, one hand gripping my stomach as another contraction rolled through me. 8 minutes. I'd been timing them, 8 minutes between the last two, and this one felt deeper, harder, almost mean. I took a shaky step forward and pounded on the door again. "Dorian!" My voice rasped, sounding foreign to my own ears. "Please, open the door. I'm in labor. We have to go." Nothing. The only movement behind the curtains was a faint shadow crossing from the couch to the kitchen. No rush to the door, no sense of urgency, just normal, casual life happening inside, as if I wasn't standing outside in a storm, begging to be let in. I pulled my phone from my coat pocket, my fingers stiff from the cold. The screen was slick with rain as I scrolled to Dorian's number. I hit call and pressed it to my ear. 1 ring, 2, straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. On the third attempt, the call didn't even connect, just a blunt message. "This number is not accepting calls." My stomach turned in a way that had nothing to do with contractions. Through the muted roar of the rain, I caught the faintest sound, a muffled voice from inside. A second later, laughter. Not the polite kind, but the easy, comfortable kind people share when they feel safe and in control. My knees felt unsteady. For a second, I thought they might give out completely. The idea that they could be laughing while I stood here, it scraped against something raw in my chest. I leaned back against the siding, the cold seeping straight through to my bones. Water dripped from my hair into my eyes, mixing with whatever heat was threatening to spill from them. I remembered my prenatal instructor's calm, matter-of-fact voice. During contractions, stay relaxed. Focus on your breathing. The absurdity of that advice in this moment nearly made me laugh out loud. Relax. Out here, in the cold, locked out of my own house, my husband's shadow visible in the lamplight, his mother right there beside him. Another contraction clawed through me, forcing my head down as I gripped the edge of the porch rail. My breaths came in short bursts until it passed. Upstairs, in that nursery I'd built, the crib was waiting. I'd chosen each piece deliberately. Soft sheets, the gentle mobile that played a lullaby I thought would soothe us both. I pictured it now, empty, while I stood outside in the rain. The thought was almost unbearable. I needed someone who wouldn't question me, wouldn't sidestep my reality. My fingers found Celine's number. I hit call before I could talk myself out of it. She picked up on the second ring. "Harmony, are you okay?" "No," I breathed. Celine, I'm outside the house. They locked me out." My voice cracked on the word locked. There was no pause on her end, no disbelief. "All right, listen to me. You need to keep breathing through the contractions." "How far apart?" 8 minutes. Maybe less." "Okay, we have some time, but not a lot." "I'm staying on the line with you. Can you get somewhere public, somewhere warm?" "I can try." I started moving toward the car, the phone tucked between my ear and shoulder. "I don't want to call 911 yet. I think I can drive for a bit. She didn't argue, but her tone stayed firm. If they get closer, 5 minutes apart, you pull over and call. I mean it. Now deep breath in. Hold. Exhale. I matched her rhythm, focusing on the sound of her voice instead of the rain pounding my hood. She kept talking. Little things, memories from when we were kids, even a bad joke about how our mother would have handled this with a rolling pin in hand. It pulled a short, shaky laugh out of me, which was better than the alternative. Reaching the car, I yanked the door open and slid inside. The interior smelled faintly of the vanilla air freshener I'd hung weeks ago, but it was already muted by the damp of my coat. I put the phone on speaker, setting it in the cup holder. "Celine? I'm here," she said. "You're going to be okay. You're stronger than you think." I gripped the steering wheel, closing my eyes for a beat. Her voice felt like a rope thrown to someone in deep water, something to hold on to, something that meant I wasn't completely alone. Lightning flashed in the rearview mirror, illuminating the house I couldn't enter. The windows glowed warm, the way I'd always imagined home should look on a night like this. But that light wasn't for me. Not anymore. "Okay," I said, straightening in my seat. "Let's go." Celine's voice was steady. "I've got you. Just keep me on the line." I pressed the ignition, knowing I had to drive away and leave them behind. The rain smeared the glow of the streetlights into long ribbons of light as I merged onto the main road. Every bump in the pavement sent a jolt up my spine, and with each contraction, I had to ease off the gas just to keep control of the car. The wipers beat a frantic rhythm against the windshield, but no matter how high I turned them, the water seemed endless. Celine's voice filled the small space of the car, steady and calm despite the strain in mine. "Breathe with me, Harm. In. Hold. Out. We're not doing this alone." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me, tightening my grip on the steering wheel. "They're closer now," I admitted between breaths. 7 minutes. Maybe less. "That's why you need to focus. Don't think about them right now. Think about getting somewhere safe." I tried, but the image of the lit window and the stillness inside burned behind my eyes. I pressed harder on the gas, only to be stopped short by another contraction, sharp, gripping, leaving me gasping. I slowed, scanning the roadside for anything open. Then I saw it. A squat building with a flickering neon sign. Darla's Diner, open 24 hours. The parking lot glistened under the overhead lamps. I swung in, tires splashing through puddles, and laid on the horn twice before fumbling for the gear shift. The diner door flew open, and a young man in a damp apron jogged toward me, shielding his head with his arm. "Ma'am, you okay?" "I'm in labor," I managed, my voice tight with pain. "Can you call 911? He didn't hesitate. "Right now. Just stay where you are." He pulled a phone from his pocket, relaying the address as he kept glancing at me like he was afraid I'd pass out. The next contraction was so strong it bent me forward over the steering wheel. Celine's voice grew sharper in my ear. "Harmony, are you still with me?" "I'm here," I panted. "But it's bad. It's going to be okay. You've got help coming." Within minutes, flashing red and blue lights cut through the rain. 2 EMTs approached, one heading straight for me, the other opening the rear of the ambulance. "Let's get you inside where it's warm," the first one said, offering his arm. I shook my head. "No time." Another contraction bore down, faster this time, stealing my breath. They exchanged a glance that told me they understood. "All right," the second EMT said, climbing into the back. "We'll deliver here." They moved with practiced precision, spreading blankets, guiding me onto the gurney, speaking in low, sure tones. The storm battered the roof of the ambulance, but inside was a bubble of urgent focus. 5 pushes later, my daughter's cry pierced the air, thin, fierce, alive. They placed her against my chest, and the heat of her skin against mine cut through everything, the cold, the rain, the ache in my body. "You've got a beautiful little girl," one EMT said with a small smile. I held her close, memorizing the tiny weight of her, the way her hand curled against my collarbone. The ride to the hospital blurred, flashes of lights outside, the hum of the tires on wet pavement. Celine still faintly audible from my phone, where it had slid to the corner of the gurney. Inside the maternity ward, nurses swept into motion, checking her vitals, wrapping her in a warm blanket, running through their checklist for me. Relief flooded me so fast it made me lightheaded. She was healthy. We were both okay, but as I lay back against the pillow, exhaustion crept in alongside something else, an empty, aching space where Dorian should have been. This moment, this first night, should have been ours together, and he had chosen not to be here. A nurse adjusted my blankets and left me in the dimmed room, my daughter asleep in the bassinet beside me. I was closing my eyes when my phone buzzed on the tray table. I reached for it, expecting Celine or maybe a hospital message. Instead, Dorian's name lit the screen. Not a call, a text. "I'm guessing you went to your sister's to be dramatic. Come home when you're done with your tantrum." The words sank in slowly, like ice water. Dramatic. Tantrum. As if I hadn't just brought his child into the world without him. As if none of it mattered. I stared at the screen, my heartbeat loud in my ears. Every ounce of relief was replaced by a heat low in my chest. Not the frantic kind from earlier, but something steadier, sharper. I set the phone face down, letting the silence settle again. My gaze drifted to the sleeping baby beside me. Her tiny chest rose and fell, her lips pursed in dreams. She, was my family now. The only one I could count on. My jaw tightened. Whatever had existed between Dorian and me before tonight was gone. I picked up the phone again, tapped the screen, and took a screenshot of the message. Then I deleted it. By the next morning, I had already made my first call to a lawyer. The hospital room was quiet except for the soft cooing sounds my daughter made in her sleep. Sunlight seeped through the blinds, warming the small space and casting stripes across the blanket covering my legs. I hadn't slept, not really. My mind had been working all night, grinding through everything that had happened like a slow, relentless storm. I sat propped up in bed, sipping the lukewarm coffee a nurse had brought me earlier. The bitterness of it didn't matter. It was something to hold, something to keep my hands busy while my thoughts clawed through every moment from the night before. The door creaked open, and Celine stepped inside carrying a fresh change of clothes and a large cup from my favorite cafe across town. She looked tired, too, but it was the kind of tired that came from loving someone through their worst night. "Thought you could use something stronger than hospital coffee," she said, setting the cup on the tray beside me. "You're a saint," I said, managing a small smile. She didn't press me right away. She sat in the chair near the bassinet and gazed down at the sleeping baby, her expression softening. Then, after a long silence, she looked up. "You want to talk about it now?" I nodded and reached for my bag on the floor. My fingers brushed against something hard at the bottom. A tablet. Dorian's tablet. He must have slipped it into the diaper bag when we were still trying to pack in a hurry for the baby's arrival. He used it mostly for email, video calls, syncing his music when he ran. I pulled it out, not quite knowing why. Maybe I was looking for something. Some note of remorse, some quiet message that said he hadn't meant for things to go this far. Maybe I wanted to see his face in a photo and remind myself that the man I thought I married still existed. But what I found instead changed everything. The tablet wasn't locked. I opened the messaging app, and there it was. A thread between Dorian, Vera, and someone named Callista. My heart picked up speed, but I kept scrolling, my hands moving mechanically as my brain tried to keep pace. Make sure the locks are switched before she gets back. That was from Vera. Already scheduled with the guy. She won't even notice until it's done. Dorian. I can come by around 9. Just let me know if she leaves again. Callista. There were dozens more, casual, confident, like they'd been doing this for months. Texts about dinners, weekends, jokes at my expense. The kind of messages people send when they think they're untouchable. My breath caught when I hit the audio file. Doorbell camera. Vera's voice, crisp and condescending. Don't let her in. She needs to learn her place. The file ended there. I stared at the screen, my ears ringing with the weight of those words. It hadn't been a lapse in judgment. It hadn't been stress or fear or some moment of panic. It was planned, deliberate. They had timed it so Callista could spend the night at my house, our house, while I was out of the way, in labor. Celine was quiet as I explained, her jaw tightening with every word. When I finished, she said nothing for a moment, then simply, "You're not staying with him, right?" I shook my head. "I'm not even staying in the same reality as him." That was when I picked up my phone again and called Astria Linford. She'd been recommended by a former client of mine who went through a high-stakes divorce last year and came out with everything she wanted. If anyone knew how to dismantle a fortress of lies, it was Astria. Her voice was calm, but sharp, efficient. "Harmony, first things first. Do you have access to text messages, financial documents, email threads?" "I have everything," I told her. "Tablet, doorbell footage, even receipts." "Good. I want you to make copies. Screenshots, downloads, whatever you can. Store them somewhere secure, cloud, USB, doesn't matter. I'll send you an encrypted folder. Then, do not confront him. Let me build this right." As we spoke, I pulled my laptop from the corner of the room and connected to the hospital's guest Wi-Fi. My fingers flew across the keyboard. Each file I forwarded felt like I was peeling off layers of fear and replacing them with armor. "Once I get the documents, we'll talk emergency restraining orders, asset freezes, and temporary custody filings," Astria said. "You have the upper hand, Harmony. You just need to move carefully." I glanced toward the bassinet. My daughter was still asleep, one tiny hand curled against her cheek. "Let's do it," I said, and meant it. By noon, the encrypted folder was filled. Messages, screenshots, video, financial statements showing charges for hotels I'd never stayed in and restaurants I'd never heard of. Vera had been using Dorian's accounts like her personal credit line. Celine sat across from me on the hospital couch, watching as I worked. She hadn't said much in the last hour, just handed me tissues when I needed them and refilled my water without asking. When I finally hit send on the last upload, I sat back and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. She smiled, not wide, but proud. "You didn't fall apart." "Not this time," I said. "I'm done falling." 3 days had passed since I left the hospital. 3 days of breastfeeding through exhaustion, of whispering lullabies to a baby who didn't know she'd been born into a storm. 3 days of lying awake at night, planning my first strike while Celine slept in the next room with one ear always open. And now, as the sun dipped behind the trees and the last of the golden light spilled across the dashboard, I sat in the passenger seat of Celine's SUV, watching our old front door from down the street. My house. Not theirs, not anymore. Celine sat behind the wheel, one hand resting loosely on the gearshift, the other curled around the baby carrier handle beside her. She didn't ask if I was ready. She didn't need to. "Text me when you're done," she said simply. I nodded and stepped out into the cool evening air. Astria met me at the edge of the driveway, hair pulled back into a sleek bun, her briefcase in one hand and a no-nonsense expression on her face. Behind her, the locksmith was already unloading his tools from the trunk of a nondescript white van. "You have the papers?" she asked. I pulled the manila envelope from my coat pocket and handed it over. Signed and notarized. We walked together up the drive. Each step felt heavier than the last, not from fear, but finality. The locksmith knelt at the front door and examined the current hardware. "Shouldn't take more than a few minutes," he muttered. Perfect. I didn't have to wait long. The moment the drill began to whir, the front door creaked open slightly, as if someone had been watching through the peephole the whole time. Dorian stepped out halfway, his face slack with disbelief. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I didn't flinch. "Exactly what you did to me," I said, calm and even. "Changing the locks. How does it feel being on the wrong side?" He looked over my shoulder, saw Astria, and then the locksmith. "You can't do this. This is my house." "Correction," Astria interjected, her voice cool. "It's your marital residence, and under Oregon's emergency protection statute, your wife, my client, has the legal right to secure it if her safety or access to shared property was compromised, which it was. From behind Dorian, Vera appeared. She was wearing one of her silk robes, the hem dragging along the wood floor like she thought she was starring in some faded drama. Her expression was a mixture of rage and theatrical indignation. "You ungrateful brat," she hissed. "After everything we've done for you—" "I'm not here to argue," I interrupted, stepping forward. "I'm here to make sure you leave." I pulled out a second envelope and handed it to her. She ripped it open, read the first few lines, and her face paled. "This is ridiculous. You think you can throw me out?" "I don't think," I said. "I know. The financial records you've been pulling from our joint accounts, the charges for luxury purchases, transfers into private savings accounts under your name, that's theft. Astria's already filed the first report." "You wouldn't dare." "She would," Astria cut in, "and she has. You have 24 hours to vacate, or we call the sheriff, and I'm sure you'd love to explain all of this to a judge under oath." Vera opened her mouth again, but nothing came out. She turned on her heel and stormed back inside, her robe trailing behind her like a surrender flag. Dorian looked between us, mouth working silently like he wanted to say something but hadn't found the right lie yet. "I'm not discussing this here," he said finally. "Not in front of strangers." "I'm not a stranger," I replied. "I'm your wife, the one you left in the rain, the one who gave birth without you." "I didn't mean for it to go that far. Mom said—" "Don't," I said, holding up a hand. "Don't blame her. You knew. You watched." He shifted his weight, hands on his hips, face tight. "Look, can we just talk?" "Alone?" I shook my head slowly. "You made your choice. I'm making mine." The locksmith stood and handed me a new set of keys. "These are yours," he said. "High security lock. If anyone tries to force entry, it'll resist everything short of a battering ram." "Thank you," I said, turning them over in my palm. They were warm from his hand. The weight of them didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. Inside, I could hear footsteps. Vera upstairs, no doubt cursing me with every item she stuffed into her designer luggage. Good. Let her pack. Let her leave knowing that for once she hadn't won. I stepped back from the porch, turning to Astria. "That's one battle down," I said. She smiled. "And several more to go. But this was a clean strike." As we walked back down the path, Celine's car headlights flicked on. The baby had woken, her small cries muffled behind the glass. I looked back once. Dorian stood in the doorway, watching me go, not with anger, not even regret. Just shock. He'd never expected me to fight back. For the first time in weeks, I knew this house was mine again. The very next morning, I woke to an alert from Astria. Court was confirmed for Tuesday. It would be a preliminary hearing, but she planned to use it to make a statement. A loud one. The courthouse sat downtown, tucked between a parking garage and an old brick building that used to be a newspaper office. It was a crisp weekday morning, the kind where the air bit at your cheeks, but the sun pretended it was still summer. I wore a blazer that didn't quite fit anymore and held my daughter's birth certificate like a shield inside my purse. Celine dropped me off out front, promising to stay nearby with the baby in case I needed anything. I watched her car pull away before taking a deep breath and stepping through the metal detectors. Astria was already waiting in the hallway, her expression as unreadable as always, though her eyes scanned my face the moment I approached. She handed me a folder and nodded toward a bench. "Let's go through it one more time." We sat down side by side, the hallway filled with the scent of floor wax and burnt coffee. Everything about this place felt sterile, businesslike, but inside me, a storm churned. The folder was full, financial statements, screenshots, emails, voice recordings, and nestled in the center, Melis's report. She had tracked nearly $92,000 siphoned from our shared accounts over the past 15 months. "Here's how we'll play it," Astria said. "We go slow, deliberate. Every dollar she took, we show where it went. Let the judge feel the weight." "Do you think Vera will even show up?" I asked. Astria smiled without warmth. She wouldn't miss a performance. "But I promise you, today, The stage belongs to us. Inside the courtroom, the air was cooler, the lighting a bit too bright. Vera sat at the defense table in a crisp beige suit, pearl earrings, and an expression like she'd just tasted something sour. Dorian sat next to her, wearing a suit he probably hadn't dry cleaned since our wedding. He looked tired, not guilty, just tired. They didn't look at me as I entered. Judge Raymond was the kind of man who seemed born for a bench, square jaw, glasses low on his nose, gray hair trimmed precisely. He reviewed the documents silently for several minutes before inviting Astria to present. "Your Honor," she began, standing confidently, "we are here today not for a divorce motion, but for the court to understand the context surrounding the breakdown of the marital trust and the breach of fiduciary duties committed not by one, but two parties sitting across from us." She called Melis first. Melis walked to the front with the quiet confidence of someone who knew her evidence was airtight. Her voice was clear and calm as she described the accounts she'd traced, how Vera had opened 2 shell companies under fictitious business names, how funds were funneled from the Quillen household accounts into these entities, and how they were used to pay for personal expenses ranging from designer handbags to private spa memberships. Dorian shifted in his seat. Astria moved slowly, piece by piece, walking the court through every withdrawal. "Was this money allocated for a specific purpose?" Astria asked. "Yes," Melis replied. "According to the joint budgeting notes, it was intended for a college savings fund, family savings, and home renovation projects that never occurred. And where is that money now?" "Gone." Vera's jaw clenched. I saw her fingers twitch against her thigh. Then came the second surprise. Astria glanced down at her notes, then looked up. "We'd like to call one additional witness, Callista Moreau." Every head in the courtroom turned. The door opened, and in walked Callista in a black dress and coat, her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun. She didn't look at me or Vera. She kept her eyes straight ahead as she took the stand. "I was involved with Dorian Quillen for about 8 months, she said, her voice low but steady. During that time, I received text messages and verbal encouragement from his mother, Vera, who told me Harmony was controlling and unstable, and that it was better for the baby if Dorian had support from someone emotionally healthy. Gasps rustled through the gallery seats. "Did she ever suggest excluding Harmony from her own home?" Astria asked. Callista nodded slowly. "Yes. The night Harmony gave birth, Vera told me not to worry, that she had taken care of everything, that the locks had been changed, and I could spend the night without interruption." Vera slammed her hand on the table. "That's a lie!" Judge Raymond looked up sharply. "You will remain silent unless addressed, Mrs. Quillen." Callista didn't flinch. "I didn't know Harmony was in labor. When I found out later what had happened, I ended things. I didn't want to be part of that." Astria thanked her and sat down. The silence that followed was dense, thick with tension. Vera sat stone still now, her shoulders squared, but her face betraying cracks. Dorian leaned back, staring at his hands. He hadn't looked at me once. The judge asked a few procedural questions, then closed the folder. "I'll review the statements and testimony. For now, the court grants temporary full custody to Mrs. Voss and places a freeze on all shared financial assets pending full investigation. Further hearings will be scheduled." We stood to leave, but I didn't move right away. I looked over at Vera. She was staring straight ahead, unblinking. If she thought she could control everything, she was learning, too late, that I wasn't the woman she thought I was. Dorian glanced up, met my eyes for the first time that day. He opened his mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to explain. I didn't care. I turned and walked out before he said a word. Outside, the sky had clouded again. Astria tucked the folder under her arm and walked beside me in silence. As we exited the courthouse steps, she turned to me and said quietly, "That went better than I expected." I nodded, adjusting the strap of my purse. "It's not over yet," I replied, "but now I know we can win." I arrived home the next afternoon, still wearing the clothes I'd worn to court the day before. I hadn't even changed. After the hearing, I'd spent the night at Celine's, curled up next to the bassinet while she quietly set out extra blankets. Neither of us had said much. There wasn't much to say after watching a woman like Vera unravel in public. When I stepped into the house, it felt different. Not just because the locks had changed, again, but because of the silence. Not the kind that stings, like the one I'd experienced outside in the rain. This one was peaceful. The baby was with Celine for the day, so I could focus on what needed to be done. I hadn't even made it to the kitchen when my phone buzzed. It was an email from the bank. Urgent. Joint account frozen pending legal review. Right below it, another. Transaction attempt declined. Quillen credit line. I opened the messages, scanning quickly. Astria had moved fast. The court had approved my petition for temporary sole financial control. Everything joint was frozen. All cards, all auto payments, all shared funds. I hadn't expected it to come through so soon. And just like that, the ripples began. Dorian was kicked out of the boutique hotel he'd been staying at. One of those trendy places with exposed beams and local art in every room. They tried to run his card. It declined. He didn't have a backup. Meanwhile, Vera had a minor meltdown in the middle of a grocery store when both her cards were declined at checkout. I didn't need to see it firsthand. A neighbor I barely knew sent me the security footage someone had posted to a local Facebook group. There she was, standing at register 6 in a pressed blouse and oversized sunglasses, screaming at a teenager named Tyler about how this was a mistake and her son would be furious. Callista disappeared from the city entirely. Moved to California, someone said. Left no forwarding address. Just gone. She wanted no part of the fallout now that it was real, now that it meant lawyers and subpoenas and possible headlines. By the end of the week, the collapse wasn't just visible, it was spreading. Astria's office called that Friday. Dorian had finally responded to the divorce papers. We scheduled the meeting for Monday morning. The conference room smelled faintly of printer ink and disinfectant. I arrived early, sat at the end of the polished table with my notes and copies of the custody schedule I wanted to propose. I didn't feel nervous, just ready. When Dorian walked in, he looked smaller, not physically, but like someone who'd been worn down from the inside. His eyes were puffy, and he held his phone like it might save him from drowning. He didn't greet me, just sat across the table and exhaled. Astria entered next, briefcase in hand. She set the final paperwork on the table and slid a copy in front of each of us. This includes full legal and physical custody to Harmony, primary residence at the property on Greenwood, financial restitution in the amount agreed upon, and release of all joint debt moving forward, she said, flipping pages like it was routine, because for her, it was... Dorian glanced at me. You really won't even talk to me? He asked. I looked back evenly. Talk about what? I made mistakes, I know. But this was never supposed to. No, I said firmly. You let it happen. You watched it happen. And you said nothing. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. He stared down at the paperwork, silent. I'm not leaving you, I added after a pause. I'm leaving the man you chose to become. Astria tapped a pen against her tablet. If we're ready to sign... I didn't wait for Dorian. I picked up the pen and signed my name cleanly at the bottom of every page. When I was done, I slid the papers across the table and stood. He didn't try to stop me. Outside, the air had shifted. The clouds that had threatened rain all morning finally parted, letting late afternoon light spill across the parking lot in long golden beams. I stood on the curb for a moment, watching the way it lit up the windshield of my car. I pulled out my phone and texted Celine. It's done. There was no reply yet, but I didn't need one. I knew she'd read it and smile. I climbed into the car and took a deep breath. No more accounts to freeze, no more papers to sign, no more fighting for a seat at a table where I was never meant to be welcomed. Still, one thing remained. Vera's sentencing hearing. It was scheduled for the following week. Her legal team had been stalling, trying to buy time, hoping the court would consider character statements and her age. But the charges were serious: fraud, identity theft, misuse of funds in someone else's name. And we had paper trails for everything. I didn't plan to speak at the hearing. I didn't need to. I just wanted to be there to watch the moment the gavel came down. I arrived at the courthouse early on sentencing day, coffee in hand, the wind cutting across the plaza like it knew something important was about to end. I'd left the baby with Celine, who promised to keep her close to her chest the whole morning. "She doesn't need to be in that room," my sister said firmly. "But you do." The main hall was already humming with activity. People in suits shuffled through security checkpoints. Others waited outside courtrooms with thick folders and nerves written all over their faces. I took a seat near courtroom 4C, where Vera Quillen's name was printed in neat block letters on the docket list beside a summary of the charges: fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit financial misappropriation. It didn't say grandmother, mother-in-law, or the woman who locked me out in the rain while I was in labor. Just Vera Quillen, defendant. Astria sat beside me minutes later, calm as ever, her dark coat neatly folded over her lap. "She's here," she said without looking at me. I nodded once, resisting the urge to turn around. I didn't want to see her before the judge did. Inside the courtroom, we sat on the prosecution side. Vera sat across from us, looking even more tightly wound than usual. Gray silk blouse, dark blazer, and not a hair out of place. Her attorney whispered something to her, but she didn't nod. She just stared ahead. The judge entered, his voice low and gravelly as he called the room to order. "We are here today to deliver sentencing for Mrs. Vera Quillen, following her guilty plea to multiple counts of financial fraud, identity misrepresentation, and misappropriation of funds involving both family members and third-party business accounts." My heart pounded, though I wasn't afraid. I didn't need this for closure, but I needed it for justice. The judge continued, "Mrs. Quillen, your conduct reflects not only a disregard for legal boundaries, but a willful exploitation of your own family's trust. It is the court's belief that your actions were calculated, long-term, and without remorse." I glanced at her hands, perfectly still, folded in her lap like she was waiting for a nail appointment. She hadn't looked at me once. "For these reasons," the judge went on, "and given the amount of documented financial harm caused, the court sentences you to 18 years in state prison with the possibility of parole after 12. Restitution in the amount of $127,000 is to be paid to your primary victim, Harmony Voss, and her daughter." There was no gasp, no outburst, just that sentence, hanging in the air like a cold final note. A bailiff stepped forward. Vera stood slowly. She didn't look around, didn't speak. Her eyes remained fixed on the judge until the cuffs were clasped around her wrists with a soft click. She didn't resist, and she didn't look back. Outside the courthouse, I exhaled into the cold air, realizing my fingers were still clenched around my cup. The coffee had gone cold. Astria stood beside me. "You got what you came for." "I got what I deserved," I said softly. "And what she earned." By the following week, life had taken on a new rhythm. Dorian now lived in a small second-floor unit across town. It was the kind of apartment you rent in your 20s, not your mid-30s. Creaky floors, street parking, neighbors who argued loudly on the stairwell. We kept things civil, barely. He had supervised visits with the baby once a week, usually at the community center under the guidance of a family coordinator. He'd tried to apologize during one of those exchanges. "I was under a lot of pressure," he'd said, eyes lowered, voice hollow. "I was in labor," I replied, not unkindly, but without softness. He didn't push again. People around the neighborhood were divided. Some crossed the street when they saw me coming, either out of guilt for once believing Vera's gossip or discomfort at having watched it all unfold. Others brought over casseroles and apologized in hushed tones for not stepping in sooner. I didn't hold it against any of them, but I also didn't open my door often. On Saturday, Celine and I took the baby to the park near the river. It was one of those rare Portland afternoons that feel like spring might come early. Clear skies, pale sun, and families out walking dogs or pushing strollers. The ducks were noisy and bold, waddling right up to the edge of the pond, where children tossed breadcrumbs and laughed. I sat on a bench with my daughter in my lap, wrapped in a soft, yellow blanket. She watched the ducks with wide eyes, completely mesmerized. And just like that, I remembered the night I stood outside our house, soaked, shaking, begging. I thought about the porch light, the sound of the lock, the silence behind the door, and I thought about now. Her warm body against mine, her fingers curled into the edge of my coat. I hadn't healed completely. I wasn't sure I ever would. But I no longer lived in that moment. I no longer lived under their roof, in their shadows, by their rules. That part of my story had ended. The baby let out a tiny sigh and leaned into my chest. When we got home later that evening, the sky had gone pink with sunset. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, the warmth wrapping around us like a promise. I locked the door behind me, this time from the inside. On my terms, with my key. The locks had changed, but so had I. And now, no one could shut us out again. In the end, this wasn't just a story about betrayal. It was about reclaiming your power when everyone around you tries to take it away. Harmony didn't just walk away. She rebuilt herself, brick by brick, with truth and courage as her foundation. Have you ever been made to feel like a guest in your own life? Like your voice didn't matter? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories that cut deep and remind us what strength really looks like.